My name is Nicholas Booth. I am the author of The Thieves of Threadneedle Street, which, even though I say so myself, is one of the most amazing stories you'll ever read. It's about a forgery that took place upon the Bank of England in 1873. It's got everything. It's got chases, it's got double crosses, it's got ladies of the night, it's got everything that you could ever want in a thriller. If you can imagine a cross between Ocean's 11 and Sherlock Holmes, that gives you a flavour of what the book's about. It's a story about greed, it's a story about human incompetence, it's a story in some places of even greater human endeavour. It's got sympathetic heroes, it's got sympathetic villains, and it's got one or two victims, and this for the first time is the true story of what really happened. I first started looking into the story about the time that the world's economies started to crash in 2008, but it wasn't really till a few more years later where I started to gather enough information on this. We're all aware of the financial crash in recent years, but the amazing thing is it's happened before, and the very first global crisis in the financial markets took place in 1873. That's the backdrop to this story. This is the interesting thing. It's happened before, it's happened now, and I'm sure it's going to happen again. And the reason is because, as this book points out, it's all to do with human greed. It's to do with the greed of the banks, it's to do with greed of the criminals, because they overreached themselves. When they did that, they were chased all over the world, and that's perhaps the most amazing part of this story. It's a cross between Ocean's 11 and Sherlock Holmes, except in this case the Sherlock Holmes was a real-life detective. His name was William Pinkerton. He was the son of the famous eponymous detective dynasty in the United States. He was the world's first, if you like, private eye. He used the symbol, the eye was the symbol that the Pinkertons used, and he knew perfectly well who was behind this. The story is about four forgers. They're all American, they're all quite young, and the lead forger was a gentleman called Austin Bidwell. That was his real name, but he used something like 27 others. So when the police tried to chase him, they weren't really sure who he was, where he'd come from, or even where he'd gone to. He was young, he was elegant, he was believable, he was very saturnine, he was very elegant. He, like all of them, dressed really, really well, because one of the key themes of the book is that most of the action seemed to take place on trains, in first-class carriages, and also in very high-end tailors, because they looked after themselves. The irony is they looked after themselves, but they were cheapskates with everybody else. In a nutshell, the scam was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then to pay Patrick, and then to pay Philip. What they did was they opened false bank accounts, and to begin with put genuine money in and transferred money between all these accounts, and then bought gold in the Bank of England. They actually went into the Bank of England to the gold weighing room. They were believable, they were charming, they were witty, they looked the part, and people bent over backwards to give them money. And the story really is about greed, because they were so good at it, they took it too far. If they'd have just stopped, they might have got away with it. What the book is really about is how they did it, but actually the chase that went on. And there were so many of these chases, they'd used so many aliases, that it took the police weeks to find out, one, who they really were, and secondly, what they'd got up to. So this is really, if you like, the very first international heist that went wrong, and they were chased. And it isn't, even though I say so myself, is an amazing story.